gotta be detailed, precise, and informed.
That's DPI.
Welcome back, everybody, to That's DPI. I'm Zach, and that is Tyler over there. And we are back with episode 3, right, of season 2. And we have a ton to cover. We have some free agency bits to hit on, more specifically, some things that we talked about in the last episode that came true. Tyler and I are fortune tellers. It is confirmed. We have some interesting trades to discuss, including Jalen Waddle and Justin Fields. We also have collected a few free agency overreactions for you that we can kind of determine whether they're real overreactions or not. You guys seem to really like that segment last year. And some of you didn't get that segment and still left hate comments, so it's great interaction anyway. And then for the last pre-ref call action item, we have our top 10 draft preview, where we're going to kind of go over some prospects that we think that are going to go in the top 10 that you should have your eyes on this upcoming season. And then, of course, we're going to continue our series on ref calls that change the game. Tyler, what ref call are we discussing later in this episode?
In this episode, we are discussing the 2010 call on Calvin Johnson, known as the Calvin Johnson rule. And it really started the idea, that era of we don't know what in the world a catch is. This segues into, did Dez Bryant catch it or not? That one's probably more famous, but it is a product of this rule.
Two extremely controversial plays that we're going to kind of break down a little bit, and then we're going to break down the actual NFL rule book. But without further ado, I wanted to bring up two things that we talked about in the last episode. The first one was when we brought up our big board of all the free agents that were still available. Dallas Goedert had not yet signed a contract. Why was this, Tyler?
So they had extended his contract, and both teams agreed to do a 4-day extension of when his contract expires.
That's right.
We talked about that both sides had interest in a new deal, but they just wanted a couple extra days, and that's exactly what happened. Within that 4-day time period, that 4-day extension before his contract expired, Dallas Goedert did in fact get a deal worked out to re-sign with the Philadelphia Eagles for a few more years.
That's right. And we talked about how it was a very unique contract kind of situation that Howie Roseman and the Eagles pulled off. And of course, they got the deal done. 1 year, $7.5 million. I think that's very affordable for a Philadelphia Eagles team that needs to pinch pennies. I think he was one of their better offensive players last year. And so it looks like it worked out for both sides. Goddard gets his money and gets to stay in Philly, doesn't have to move his family, and the Eagles retain a tight end at a team-friendly price, right?
Yeah, and to me, I wonder what the stalled negotiations were, because a 1-year deal typically is not something that a player wants. They usually want at least a 2 or 3-year deal, give themselves a little bit of protection. So I'm wondering if Philly really doubled down on the 1 year, but eventually they gave Goddard maybe a little bit more money than a 1-year deal would have been. So both sides kind of get that protection. Goddard gets the protection of the money, and Philly gets the protection of not giving him a long-term deal given his age.
Yeah, I think it's just how the signing bonus is spread out. They have a lot of the Eagles. It appears, according to Spot Track, that he will be on the books for Philadelphia until his age 35 season in 2030, with how they've spread the money out. So it appears that maybe Dallas was just Dallas Goedert, not Dallas, the Cowboys. Dallas Goedert was just making sure that he was still getting, a good amount of money this year, even though the Eagles are doing all this crazy void years. And we don't know the exact terms of the contract, or I would break it down for you live right now. Once we do, maybe we can come back and do a third update on this, and we can truly understand the crazy mind of Howie Roseman and how he deals with void years. But there is another thing that we discussed and got right, and I'm going to let Tyler take it because it was his prediction. Tyler, what did you get right from the last episode?
I know the comments in our videos think that I know nothing, but I correctly predicted Kyler Murray to the Vikings. I said last week that Kyler Murray succeeded very well when he had a Hall of Fame wide receiver on his roster, and that be Larry Fitzgerald when he was with the Cardinals. He started off 8 or 9-0 that year until the new Call of Duty game came out. And now that the Vikings have a potential Hall of Famer on their roster, Kyler Murray could be a good fit for the Minnesota Vikings. And the Minnesota Vikings agreed with me. They did sign Kyler Murray. So it'll be very interesting to watch this year as Kyler Murray competes with J.J. McCarthy. And I really think that that's a very good test for J.J. McCarthy, because if J.J. McCarthy cannot beat out Kyler Murray right now, he does not deserve to be a starter.
Agreed. And I have a lot more to say about Kyler Murray. But we have an overreaction later that deals with the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to keep it close to my chest until we get to that segment of the show. So if you're interested in Kyler Murray Vikings talks, don't go anywhere. Stay here. We're going to talk about it later. But
I
we
agree
do
with that.
have.
I want to talk a lot more about that, but it is a good highlight that you and I each got something right
Oh,
in our
yeah.
predictions last week.
Look at us. We're starting off season 2 on a roll. So we don't plan on not getting things right the rest of the, like, we're going to keep doing that. We just want to make sure that we highlighted early on that we're doing it well. I know some of you in the comments are
It's
asking to bring back fantasy coverage because of my take on Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, which was also proven right. He was well worth a second round pick, as I predicted that he would be. So we'll do that again as well. But go ahead, Tyler.
I was gonna say, in terms of making predictions, especially free agency predictions, it's like a March Madness bracket. You're not gonna get a perfect bracket, but which upsets you predicted and who you have winning the championship and getting that right means something.
100%. Absolutely. But speaking of some moves that we were talking about, we talked a lot about the Miami Dolphins and how they released Bradley Chubb and Tyreek Hill. Well, they're losing another piece of that Mike McDaniel's Miami Dolphins offense, and that's Jalen Waddle, right? They've just traded him away to the Denver Broncos for a first-round pick this year, a third-round pick this year, and then the teams swapped fourth-round picks in this year's draft. So net a first and a third for Waddle. What are your initial reactions to such a big trade for both teams, right?
Yeah, to me, this is more of a Broncos moment, because we know the Dolphins are rebuilding, especially with Hill and Chubb being gone, Tua being gone. I know Tua's bad, but when you bring in a new quarterback, you're clearly rebuilding. So it's really who got Waddle. And with it being Denver, a team that was in the AFC Championship game last year, possibly even the Super Bowl had Nick's gotten hurt, this is a big upgrade to the Denver Broncos. In my opinion, I think the AFC West is a very good division. If you've got a very good up and coming Chiefs offense again, you've got the number 1 overall pick going to Oakland. You've got you've got LA Chargers, always looking good every offseason. The Denver Broncos are, in my opinion, now a favorite to win the AFC West again, and possibly a favorite to win the whole AFC. This is a great move for Denver.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Bo Nix's pretty strong arm, right? He threw the deep ball to guys like Troy Franklin and like Pat Bryant last year. I think that Waddle could bring a really nice element to this offense. Also, Jalen Waddle excels in the short game, getting jet sweeps. He did that all the time in Miami. So just adding a versatile playmaker like that to an offense which really just runs through Bo Nix, kind of like scrambling around and finding Cortland Sutton every once in a while. I think it adds a whole new element to Sean Payton's attack there. But what do you think of the value that Miami got? They got a first and a third for Jalen Waddle, Waddle.
I think they overpaid a little bit. I'm kind of ignoring the 4th-round picks because it's just a pick swap. It's not too much of a value on that one. But a first and a third, I think, is a lot. I think it's something that it's a puzzle piece that Denver needs, but they overpaid to get it. So I really do think it's a best of both worlds. Miami gets the value end, but Denver gets the puzzle piece end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I also think it's an overpay. Jalen Waddle really hasn't been the same since Tua Tagovailoa came back to earth, right? And Bo Nix is not known for being an overly efficient or accurate quarterback. He just kind of makes plays when they're needed. He was really inconsistent last year. And so to me, trading a first and a third round pick for a player who hasn't had 1,000-yard season in 2 seasons after playing 15 and 16 games in the last 2 years, like nearly full seasons and not even sniffing 1,000 yards, to me indicates that he's a little bit overpaid, or at least a little bit scheme dependent on those cheap motions and those kind of manufactured yards that he was getting in the Mike McDaniels offense, right?
Can I play a little devil's advocate here, though?
Sure.
I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this next take, but is it safe to say that maybe it is a fair value because Jalen Waddle is overshadowed by Tyreek Hill, the running back Achane, and just a horrible Tua Tagovailoa? And so if you put him in a good scheme with a good quarterback, he would hit 1,000. Is that
I was more referencing
again? That's me
this
being devil's advocate.
I was more referencing this season as well, where
Hmm.
he caught 64 balls for 910 yards. Tyreek Hill was out by week 4, right, with that gruesome knee injury.
Hmm.
So we can't really blame Tyreek Hill for his lack of
Okay.
production. And when we're talking about secondary receivers who are speedsters, I think that an example that we need to look at is Jamison Williams, who is stuck behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, and still has back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. So maybe the limiting factor is Tua Tagovailoa, but without Tyreek Hill, I would expect a receiver who garners a first and a third round pick to have capitalized on that opportunity regardless of the quarterback, right? Justin
Hmm.
Jefferson, who I know that would garner that draft capital and more, got 1,000 yards catching passes from Max Brosmer and JJ McCarthy this year. So I think that it's a standard that we should hold receivers to if we're going to be trading that much value for them. So I do think it's a severe overpay by Denver, but maybe it's not the worst overpay in the world because they have to capitalize on their window while Bo Nix is on that rookie deal, right?
So how much of an overpay would you say this is? Do you think a second and a third is better or two-thirds? Well, what would you have given the value of Jalen Waddle?
I think that a second and a third would be fine. I think what I would have done is just one first round pick in the fourth round pick swap. I think the third is way too much. But
Okay.
Miami needs more picks. They've traded or cut their entire team away. So
Hmm.
obviously, I don't think they were going to take that. And I think that they would have dealt him earlier in the season. They just kind of waited. Were very patient. Their new GM is doing a great job. Or did they hold on to their GM? I forget what Miami did, but
They got a new GM and then they hired a new head coach after the season was over.
right. And I think that they were smart to wait because Denver kind of got desperate seeing the thinner wide receiver class in this year's draft and the extremely thin free agency class. Like Alec Pierce is the top paid wide receiver in this free agency class, and he got way overpaid, in my opinion, almost $30 million a year for Alec Pierce. So I think
Mhm.
it's smart for Miami to get the max value when he is at his most valuable, 27 years old. And I think that, Denver didn't really have a choice if they want a top end wide receiver. So is it an overpay? Yes, but it might be just the going rate for a good wide receiver these days, right? Because everyone's holding on to theirs. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I, I think he's overvalued, but maybe compared to the market, it's pretty close.
Mhm. But another trade happened recently, not as important or as major, but the Chiefs got their starting quarterback for week 1.
I think he's the starting quarterback, but yes, Justin Fields was acquired, right, by Kansas City. What
Hmm.
did Kansas City give?
They gave next year's 6th round pick, and that was it. So 2027 6th round pick for Justin Fields.
So,
Value wise, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah, value wise.
I was gonna say value wise, I actually like it. It's next year's 6th round pick for a guy who is gonna be prepared to start at least the first couple games. If Mahomes comes back and does start week 1 and 2, awesome. But the Chiefs were looking for a quarterback that can start these first 2 weeks, and only paying next year's 6th round for it, I think is a very good value. Is he the right guy? That's where the debate goes.
Yeah, and considering that his cap number, according to Over the Cap for Kansas City, is only $3 million, I think that's about as good as they were going to get for a 27-year-old former first round pick quarterback. Because when you look at the free agent quarterbacks, we kind of discussed them, right? It's barren. We have no idea who the Cardinals are going to go with at quarterback because you've either got veterans in their 40s or draft someone from this utterly abysmal quarterback class. Outside of Fernando Mendoza, there's not a single startable guy, in my opinion, that you can really rely on for your franchise. So the Chiefs made a decision. They're going to give up a pick a year down the line, a late round pick at that, a pick they hope to be in the tail end of that sixth round, right? Because they're getting back to the playoffs, you would imagine, for a guy that, has started games in the NFL for the last 4 seasons. And as terrible as I think Justin Fields is as a pure passer, he had 7 passing touchdowns and just 1 interception last year. Just he took care of the ball, and he's a good rushing threat and could potentially provide a brief spark to the Chiefs offense while Patrick Mahomes heals up if he's not ready by week 1. Some Chiefs analysts seems to think that he could rush it and get back by week 1, but this at least gives them some insurance if he can't.
You mentioning the lack of interceptions, you beat me to my point on why I really like this. You mentioned seven touchdowns, only 1 interception last year. In fact, the previous year he had 5 touchdowns and still only 1 interception. So he didn't start the full year either 2 years, obviously, but only 2 interceptions the last couple years. 2024 he had a 93 quarterback rating, or he had a 93 rating. And this last year, he had an 89 rating. So he takes care of the ball and is relatively efficient. So if you bring in an offense, which the Chiefs are doing this, if you bring in an offense that is not solely quarterback reliant, they just brought in Kenneth Walker, the Super Bowl MVP, had a great year last year, to really kind of take over and be run heavy. And all you need is a quarterback that's not going to turn the ball over. I think Justin Fields is who you got.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overlook his ability to keep the ball safe. I don't think that he wins you games necessarily, but in the later stages of his career, he hasn't been losing games like he did his rookie season in Chicago, where he threw 7 touchdowns and 10 picks and fumbled the ball a lot and had a sub 60 completion percentage. That's no longer Justin Fields that we're talking about. In 2024 with Pittsburgh, his completion percentage was all the way up to 65%. So that's almost normal quarterback range. And I still don't view Justin Fields as a normal quarterback because I don't think that he gets yards in a normal way. I think a lot of the times he's just so athletic, he scrambles around and finds open receivers. But someone else does that I know. And in no way am I comparing the two. But that's kind of what Patrick Mahomes does, right? He doesn't like the standard drop back pass and hit players in the intermediate zone or throw an accurate deep ball or something like that. The playmaking is a crucial part of the Chiefs offense, and it's probably not something that they're going to be able to rush Patrick Mahomes back into because he will be limited. And like once you're even medically cleared to play on an ACL, it still takes time to get athleticism back. So potentially the Chiefs are just looking for a stopgap until Mahomes is more full. Go.
I agree. And in terms of really how will Justin Fields do, let's say he starts 2 weeks. In terms of how we'll do, we'll have to wait until the schedule comes out. But we did just get a little schedule preview this week. You want to reveal that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, for the first time in as long as I can remember, the NFL is starting on a Wednesday night. The Seattle Seahawks will open on Wednesday, September 9th. I don't know if their opponent has been revealed yet, but we know the game after that as well is on Thursday the 10th versus it is the 49ers and the Rams that will play that game in Melbourne. So the reason that this is happening, Tyler, is because of a act passed by Congress in the 1960s that prevents professional football games from being played on Fridays. The NFL got around it last year but they're not going to be allowed to get around it this year. As you know, that they got around it last year because the Chiefs played on a Friday night. We watched that game together. That was their Brazil game. But they won't get around it this year because of the way the dates fall on the calendar. It's too late in the year to play games on Friday, so they must instead move the Super Bowl game, the season opener featuring the Seattle Seahawks, back a day to Wednesday. So Wednesday night football to open the season.
It's wild, and we'll talk more about this in our schedule preview here in a few months. But why even put 2 primetime games that first week? Just make that NFL kickoff on the Thursday, and then do 2 Sunday night games that first Sunday, or 2 Monday night games, whatever it ends up being. I don't know. I feel like it's weird. I feel like it's a weird money grab. I'm not a fan of the NFL playing on Wednesdays.
I agree with you that it's a money grab, but the reason why it's happening is because the NFL is now adopting a formula that prioritizes international games. And in order to play more international games, you need more mini buys. You need mini buys. Teams playing in Germany coming off their bye, for example, or teams having a bye immediately following playing in an international game. The reason why the Chiefs played in Brazil last year and why there's a game in Melbourne right after the season opener is because that's the best way to keep players healthy and happy about playing internationally. Because if you play on a Thursday night, you get a mini bye to go play your next game in the States. And so
Now, for the viewers, can you explain what you mean by mini buy?
right, like I'm more talking about like teams that play on Thursday nights kind of get a mini bye week where you get extra rest days that you wouldn't normally have on the Sunday to Sunday NFL schedule. So the NFL tends to like to give teams mini buys when they play on holidays or when they play internationally, i.e., when the Lions play on Thanksgiving, they tend to get a mini buy there, or when a team plays internationally. So
at least 10 days of rest, basically.
yeah, essentially.
10 days in between their next game.
Yeah, exactly. 10 days between their next game. But I don't think it's necessarily a huge money grab. The NFL just has no way around playing their Super Bowl champion to open the season. They've always done it, right? Or they've done it for a long time. And so they just kind of have to move that game wherever it works. And they obviously can't play a Saturday game for their international game because that's not long enough. So they just decided to move everything back.
The only time that I have seen the Super Bowl champion not host is in the 2013 home opener. It was the Baltimore Ravens, who had just won the Super Bowl. The Baltimore Orioles were playing a home game on the day of the NFL kickoff. So they went to Denver. One of their road teams was Denver, and they hosted the Denver Broncos hosted the Super Bowl champions, Baltimore Ravens, which was 2013. And if any sports history nerds out there remember 2013 Denver, that was Peyton Manning's 55 touchdown year. Things did not go well for the Super Bowl champions that year.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's an interesting stat. But if there's anybody that I expect to know schedule lore in the NFL, it's you, Tyler.
And again, it was only because the Baltimore Orioles were already scheduled to play a home game on that day. And so they're like, well, we can't have the Ravens also do that because of traffic and security concerns on that regard.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, okay. But that covers our schedule release news. We of course will make a long video when the full schedule releases and then kind of maybe identify some that's DPI on location potentials. But that happens typically in May, right? Right around early May.
Early to mid-May. Early May, they start to reveal a couple primetime games, and then usually a Wednesday right in the middle of May is when the full NFL schedule comes out.
So yeah, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on so that you can see that one down the line in May. But we've got some fun overreactions for you guys about free agency. So do you want to get into the first one? It's about your team.
Yeah.
It is.
If you've got that, I'll go first if you want to read me what that says.
Sure. Our first overreaction, we're going to kind of determine based on these statements whether they are in fact overreactions or whether, there's some truth there, is the window for Kansas City isn't closing anytime soon, which is a weird thing to say about a team picking in the top 10, right? So
Yeah.
is this an
Weirdly
overreaction to
enough,
say that they'll be back immediately? Or, is the window over with an aging Travis Kelsey and an injured Patrick Mahomes?
To me, it's not an overreaction to say that the Super Bowl window is still open. I'm not going to guarantee that we'll be back, but the window's still there. The Chiefs have definitely prioritized their offense by signing Kenneth Walker. We let some loose ends go in Jawan Taylor. We are not overpaying for defensive secondaries. That's why they've lost some there. So as long as they hit the draft really well, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, and hit hard these next couple weeks. As long as they hit the draft well, the Chiefs still have the number one offensive mind in football in Andy Reid, and in my opinion, the number one defensive mind in football in Steve Spagnuolo. So to me, it's not an overreaction.
So here's the interesting thing. In kind of our first couple of episodes, I made the argument that the blueprint was out to beat Kansas City, right? And we both kind of scoffed at a lot of the people saying the downfall of the Chiefs is nigh. But it did prove to be more true than either of us could have predicted this past season for a variety of factors, right? Obviously, I think the season would have turned out differently if Mahomes was healthy through it. I don't think the Chiefs are picking top 10 if he is. I think they pull out some wins down the stretch and kind of do what the Lions did and go 9-8, even though they didn't make the playoffs either. So, but I do see more truth in this than you do because of Travis Kelsey's steep decline. I just don't think he's been the same player for the last 2 seasons at least. And I can't imagine what another year of regression is going to do for Travis Kelsey's level of play. I think the Chiefs would be wise to address tight end early in this year's draft in order to kind of prepare for both the regression and the eventual departure of their franchise's best player.
So you're saying it is an overreaction?
Yes, I'm
Or
saying
you're
it's an
saying
over. I'm saying
okay.
that there's not too much truth in it. I do think that the Chiefs are going to have to reset and rebuild for a couple of years before they get back to Super Bowl window territory.
Okay. Okay. That's what I was confused about. But you also mentioned that they need to address the tight end. So let's say in the draft, they've got the number 9 overall pick. Let's say they do get the best tight end in the NFL draft, and that guy becomes super good. Is the window back open?
You know what? Maybe, but the last 2 drafts have not been the best for Kansas City, and
I agree with that.
and so I would need to see Brett Veach show vintage Brett Veach tendencies again. And he has a real opportunity to do so. I'm not saying that it's impossible because having a top 10 pick in every round, that's huge, right? It makes hitting a lot easier. But I'm not moved by some of the picks that he's made in the last 2 drafts. And I think that in order to keep a window open per se, you have to address that. But yes, if they nail this draft, I think that that what you said could come true.
Okay. What about number 2? What is our second over or under reaction?
Dear patient viewers, thank you for waiting. This is our discussion about the Minnesota Vikings, and this overreaction is the Vikings just became one of the most interesting teams in the NFL. I want you to go
You want
first
to take
on
that,
this
or do you want
one.
me to go? You want me
You
to
know
go
what?
first?
You know what? I am in the NFC North, so I can speak on this one. I don't think this is an overreaction. I think that the Minnesota Vikings are beyond fascinating this season because they managed to win 9 games with Max Brosmer and JJ McCarthy at quarterback. That's how good Brian Flores is as a defensive coordinator. That's how good Kevin O'Connell is as a regular season head coach. And so I think when you look at how talented and how schematically sound that defense is, It reminds me of the Seattle Seahawks of this year because, they don't really have any massive superstars. Minnesota, I'm talking about. They have a lot of great guys that perform really well under Brian Flores' scheme. It's very similar to Seattle. There's not a Max Crosby or a Myles Garrett or a Micah Parsons on that Seattle Seahawks defense. Who there is, though, is 11 quality starters that play like hell for their defensive mastermind and head coach Mike McDonald. So, not saying that the Vikings are bona fide Super Bowl contenders, but if you gave them this season competent quarterback play, I think that they make the playoffs. And so I think that they're a playoff team this year because Kyler Murray will give them competent quarterback play. That's my opinion. So not an overreaction. They are one of the most interesting teams in the NFL.
Yeah, interesting is a very subjective word.
Sure.
I don't think the Cardinals saw anything good out of Kyler Murray since that one good year, and I don't think the Minnesota Vikings are either. I think it's going to be very similar to last year. I think they're going to be a very mid team. I'll admit that I was wrong about Sam Darnold. I said the exact same thing about Sam Darnold, and they ended up doing very well. And then the following year, Sam Darnold was a Super Bowl champion. However, in 2025, Kyler Murray threw 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He threw an interception for every 2 touchdowns he threw. He turns the ball over often. The year before was the same formula. He threw 21 interceptions and 21 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Pretty close to a ratio of 1 interception for every 2 touchdowns. That's not a recipe for a playoff caliber team. If that continues in Minnesota, the Vikings might be better than a season of J.J. McCarthy starting, but aren't going to be very good, especially in a very tough division with the Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, and Green Bay Packers, who all have made deep playoff runs within the last couple years.
So my counter to that is Kyler Murray's touchdown interception ratio is a hell of a lot better than a negative touchdown interception ratio that J.J. McCarthy had last year. 11 TDs to 12 picks, and that doesn't even count fumbles. J.J. McCarthy was so bad last year when he played, but somehow he was not worse than his replacement in Max Brosmer. Max Brosmer was even worse as a quarterback. So my argument is if Kyler Murray stays healthy, Max Brosner, for context, threw 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So absolutely putrid quarterback play. If Kyler Murray stays healthy, which has been his biggest obstacle in his entire career, I think the Minnesota Vikings are sneakily very talented along the defensive front. Worth noting, they also just fired their GM, so they're going to have a fired-up new GM to help them draft some contributors here to make this team a playoff contender once again. I don't think the Chicago Bears will make the playoffs next year. I don't think that they're as good as people say they are. I think that Caleb Williams still has a lot of flaws, and I think that defense isn't very good. It was very opportunistic last year, so I think the Minnesota Vikings are easily the 3rd best team and potentially the 2nd best team in the North.
Who do you have low? So you said the 3rd best team. That would be the Chicago Bears being 4th?
That's right. They are the worst team in the division.
I don't know how the Vikings got to 9-8 last year, because you are correct. Especially when you look at the touchdown to interception ratio of J.J. McCarthy and his plays last year is absolutely insane. But just in a normal sense, I don't think Kyler Murray is the answer. The Vikings have the 18th pick. I think all your superstars are going to go top 10, top 15. And then really when you get to the back half of the first round, you're going to get good players. But whether you get a good player that can start right away and mind you, a good player that can start right away is really going to be all about how well and who you pick. I question the Vikings' ability to do that, not necessarily because their history is good or bad on that. That kind of looking at this year's draft, I think there's going to be a lot of gambles that are going to have to be taken. So if they gamble right, you know what? Maybe they are interesting. But it's very easy for the Vikings to be horrible this year.
Interesting. So two statements and two essentially disagreements from the both of us. But here is another statement. A lot about quarterbacks in these statements, but the third one is the Falcons may have finally solved their quarterback problem. As you know, they've been rocking with Michael Penix for quite a while, and now they've just signed a fellow left-handed quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, who we've also discussed in this episode. What are your thoughts on this statement, Tyler? Do you think the Falcons have finally solved their quarterback problem?
No, I don't think they found their quarterback. I think Tua might have been the best quarterback they could have gotten in free agency, but to say that they finally solved their quarterback problem, I think is a big overreaction. There's a lot of pieces to the Falcons that they need. Quarterback, of course, being one of them, but Tua has just been so bad these last couple years. And they've had the weapons too with Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. I know Tyreek Hill got injured in week 4, but even kind of looking at the last 2 years with Tyreek Hill having a good start, I think he's got injured both years, I guess. But when Hill has been healthy, and having Achane, and having Waddle, and having an all right defense, Tua has still played horrible, and they have failed to protect him. The Falcons' offensive line, while they are not the worst offensive line in the NFL, they do not give me a lot of hope in terms of being able to protect Tua. And so to me, I think they've got the exact same problem. To me, this is just another Kirk Cousins.
So I'm going to disagree with you on with everyone healthy, Tua has still played horrible. Maybe in the last 2 seasons, that's true. But even in the last 2 seasons, I don't think Tua has been as bad as like apocalyptic Tua fans are saying. In 2023, Tua Tagovailoa threw 4,800 yards, nearly 5,000 yards, and 30 touchdowns. That was when everyone was healthy back in 2023. He was a bona fide MVP candidate back then. Okay. So I don't think that Tua is as bad as everyone says he is. And you mentioned all these names, right? Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Well, I've got some names for you. I've got Drake London, Bijan Robinson, all of these great, arguably the RB1 in the NFL, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, a top 5 wide receiver according to PFF grades last year. And I think their offensive line is much better than you give them credit for. Chris Lindstrom, the guard, was the second highest graded guard in football last year. And they also have Jake Matthews, who I think is a solid pass blocking tackle. He earned an 82.4 grade there on 1,000 snaps. That's pretty dang good. 82 is excellent for a tackle. And so I think that if you make the right moves in the draft, then potentially the Falcons could have filled their holes at quarterback.
Now, the Falcons' offensive line, though, while, yes, I think a lot of those interior offensive linemen are better at run blocking, though. Or correct me if I am wrong on that one.
Right.
The Falcons circles that I'm in say that they're really hyped on the Falcons' run blocking, but they're not hyped on their ability to pass protect.
Right. Those interior guys that are really solid, they're average pass blockers. Jake Matthews, the tackle, is a well above average. He's the 5th best pass blocking tackle in the league, left tackle. So, but that interior line is average. I would say average.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't say below average on their pass blocking grades because they were maybe Lindstrom is below average with a 43 out of 77 guards, but I also don't think that that's a very accurate assessment of how good Lindstrom is as a player.
The other thing I want to clarify too is because you mentioned Tua's his very successful year in 2023 with his 4,600 passing yards. 2023, he also absolutely got blown out in the wild card. And so to me, if you ask a Falcons fan, hey, do you want to get blown out in the wild card as your ceiling? I don't think that fits the definition of they've solved their quarterback problem.
Well, for a team,
you need a guy that
that hasn't made the playoffs in quite a while, maybe they would take that.
Understandable, but this is the same problem that I don't know if I want to use Alex Smith here, but Chiefs fans were ready to move on from Alex Smith because they knew he wasn't going to get the job done at the end of the day. The only reason people did not want to move on from Alex Smith is because they were terrified of going back to absolute mediocrity. But to fit
Wait
the
a
definition of
minute.
does this solve the problem?
Wasn't that the freaking modern ice bowl that you're talking about that they got blown out in? That 2023
I believe
wild
it
card game?
was.
I don't
Yes.
think that's not. I'm not going to take that as a point. I'm not going to let you argue that. I think that that's
Okay,
BS.
So when they go into Lambeau Field so if the Falcons make the playoffs and go into Lambeau, that's not going to happen again.
Well,
If it's a 5 versus 4 seed and they
that
go
would
up to the
that would require
Meadowlands,
the Packers
that's
winning the
not going to happen
division.
again.
That would require the Packers to win the division under Jordan Love, which they have not done. So let's not go throwing
Okay.
out hypotheticals here.
All right. So then a more realistic situation then is, like I said, MetLife Stadium. If you go anywhere in the north, the same thing's going to happen in the NFC. If you go up to Philly, you can get freezing temperatures also.
Okay, Philly's the best example that you've given because MetLife, the Giants are going to host a playoff game. No.
Listen, if you get Dart and Scattaboo in a real good year, they've already got a good. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but I'm saying that there are very cold NFC teams that exact same thing would happen to Tua again.
Okay, your point is taken, but
Chicago,
it takes Chicago maybe, but we know where I stand on Chicago. Your point is taken, but it would take some cosmic bad luck for them to get the 4th or 3rd coldest game in NFL history again. That was insane.
But
that game in Kansas City, you were there. It was freezing.
I was there, and it was freezing. Do not get me wrong. But my point is, though, one way or the other, Tua cannot lead the Falcons to a Super Bowl. And when I see the definition or when I see the phrase, have the Falcons fixed or have they solved their quarterback problem? To me, to solve the quarterback problem, that means they finally got their quarterback like Matt Ryan again that can lead them to the Super Bowl. And I don't think Tua is the guy.
Okay.
At best case scenario, he's an Alex Smith.
So we disagree on the premise of the argument. I think they have solved it because I think that they're a good enough team to compete in their division, which is bad, and to make a little run in the playoffs as long as they don't run into the frozen tundra. But we've got 2 more overreactions for you. The first one is San Francisco may have added the exact receiver they were missing, and that receiver is, of course, veteran wide receiver Mike Evans. I'll let you go on this one.
To me, this is not an overreaction. I think that this is a perfect fit for San Francisco. I think San Francisco is a team that really thrives on the weapons they put around Brock Purdy, and then Brock Purdy just not screwing it up. I think that's the formula for San Francisco, and I think Mike Evans is a very consistent 1,000-yard receiver. Is he the greatest receiver in the NFL? No, but he is consistent and he is healthy. That is what San Francisco needs, especially on the healthy side. Consistent 1,000-yard wide receiver is a perfect fit for San Francisco. And if you get that again, you keep him healthy, you add to the weapons of that Brock Purdy needs, and I do say needs, then yeah, this is a great solution for San Francisco.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Especially when you mention the weapons that Brock Purdy needs, right? He's never been a quarterback. He kind of fits in that Tua mold where he's never operated without a top 3 mind in football, top, CMC level running back play, George Kittle, and the production that Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel provided as wide receiver 1 and 2. And we see that when you take those away, the Niners are more beatable than they probably like to be, obviously. And that's why they're making moves. Of course, when Brandon Ayuk holds out, we haven't even covered that situation. What a complete disaster. 4-year, $120 million contract, and he hasn't played it down. And he didn't even train rehab with the team, and he's gone. So I think that this is not an overreaction. I think that it's a correct statement for 2 reasons. Number one, because they got him on a great deal. Mike Evans will be according to Spot Track, a $4.2 million cap hit player for next year. $4 million. That is a
that's
deal.
huge.
The reason why he's only 4.2 is because there are 3 void years on this contract. 4 void years on this contract, excuse me. And so he would be under contract or he would be on the books for them until he's 40 years old because he's 33 now. And he has money in the cap hit until 2032. That's a pretty crazy deal. But they have an out where after 1 year, they can cut him for just $9 million of dead cap. That's fine. If you need to cut him, cut him. So it's a great deal because the cap hit is super minimal this year. It's probably the only way they could have afforded it. Mike Evans still gets all that money. It's not like Mike Evans isn't getting that money. He's still going to get it all. So I like it for them. I think it's a good move. And I think that the Niners are going to be pretty dangerous on offense next year as long as he stays healthy, right? You know, there's that little electrical substation over there in San Francisco. We don't know what it does to the injuries. So we'll see how it goes.
Which is a wild thing on its own.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unsubstantiated at this point. Like there's one person that's saying, you know, this could happen. There's a lot of studies. I mean, they've used the same training facility since the 80s, and they've been below average on injuries up until like this miniature period where they've been really above average. So is it really having an effect? But, you know, signing off injured players comes with oft injuries. So I think that we have to consider that when we grade this move. But I think if he stays healthy, it's a great move. But we're going to go ahead and skip our last overreaction and move straight into everyone's favorite segment of all time ever. That is ref calls that change the game or ref calls of the week, depending on whether we're in season or off season. And we have a real doozy for you. As we said earlier, we've got the Calvin Johnson rule. So, Tyler, I'm going to get the video up. Will you kind of give us the situation?
Yeah, so the situation is it's less than 30 seconds in the game. It's fourth quarter, less than 30 seconds. The Detroit Lions are down by a touchdown. A touchdown wins it. A field goal is not enough. We see a deep pass to Calvin Johnson. He catches it, sets the ball on the ground while getting up. No longer has the ball, but it's a touchdown. The Lions are celebrating, and the refs are hurrying to talk about if this is a catch. This angle right here shows it. We've got feet down. We've got possession. We've got knee in the end zone. We've got the ball hitting the ground, and then Calvin Johnson no longer having the ball in his hands. And so it comes down to, was this a catch? And under modern times, maybe, maybe not. But we want to look at what rules were applicable at this point in time. This is 2010 is where this clip comes from. So, Zach, you've got the rule books. What rules are the NFL refs operating at this point in time?
Yeah, let me get those pulled up really fast. I've got a copy of the 2010 NFL rulebook that states that to gain possession of a loose ball that has been caught, intercepted, or recovered, a player must have complete control of the ball. Look at us. And have both feet or any part of his body other than his hands completely on the ground inbounds. And maintain control of the ball long enough to perform any act common to the game. If the player loses the ball while simultaneously doing these things, there's no possession. So, and then there is one note that helps us clarify specifically for this situation. A player who goes to the ground in the process of attempting to secure possession of a loose ball must maintain control of the ball throughout the process of contacting the ground, whether in the field of play or the end zone. If he loses control of the ball and the ball touches the ground before he regains control, there is no possession. So, that begs the question, because the key wording of this rule is a player who goes to the ground in the process of attempting to secure possession. In the process. The catch process was the big debate from 2010 onwards. Am I right on that, Tyler?
You are correct.
So let's take one final look at that. And I think I'm going to put those words on the screen for everybody so that we can, like, not just hear them from my mouth, but I'll quote the NFL rulebook here.
Mhm.
But what is the process of a catch? What is an axe common to the game?
So
what are these things?
the wording says in the process of getting possession, correct?
Yes.
Of securing possession.
In the
To
process of
me,
securing possession.
To me, he's got possession. And then go ahead and play it a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll play the slow-mo.
To me, he's got possession. He's got possession. He's got possession. He's down. He's got possession. He doesn't have possession. To me, he's got possession for a lot of time. So
Correct.
to me, this is not him in the process of getting possession. He's got the possession. To me, this should have been a catch under those rules because he's not attempting to gain possession. He's already got the possession.
So
and feet and knee in the end zone.
If that's where the sentence ended, in the process of attempting to secure possession of a loose ball, if that's where the sentence ended, great. But the problem is, must maintain control of the ball throughout the process of contacting the ground. For some reason, the NFL at this time said that at any point, like in the process of the catch, even if it's at the very, very end of the process, which I believe this is, if you contact the ground and lose it, it is not a catch. So I'm going to read to you the official current NFL rulebook, and we will see how they addressed this, and then we will look at the Calvin Johnson catch, and then we'll go look at the Dez Bryant catch, no catch as well, doing this same kind of exercise. So in Article 7, it's the same article. To gain possession of a loose ball that has been caught, intercepted, or recovered, a player must A, have complete control of the ball with his hands or arms, and B, have both feet or any other parts of his body other than his hands completely on the ground inbounds. So we're pretty similar, right? Here's where it gets different. And after A and B have been fulfilled, clearly perform any act common to the game, e.g., extend the ball forward, take an additional step, tuck the ball away, turn upfield, or avoid or ward off an opponent. They added all of that clarification in this modern rule book that does not exist during the Calvin Johnson era. It is not necessary that he commit such an act, provided that he maintains control of the ball long enough to do so. That is new, everybody. And so
then
when we go back to this clip of Calvin Johnson making the grab to win the game against the Chicago Bears, not only, hold on, let me get it up, does he get the 2 feet and maintain possession, but he performs an act common to the game. He sticks the football out, right? Had he been reaching for the end zone, that would be an act common to the game. And he maintained possession of the ball long enough, in my opinion, to do so, clearly because he did one. So this, under modern NFL rules, would absolutely, in my opinion, be a catch. Tyler, do you agree?
I do agree with that, yes.
And so,
but you think that without that extra clarification, you think that the refs got it correct per the 2010 rulebook? Correct.
There was no time stipulation in the past rulebook. As you know, there was no it wasn't, it never said long enough. It just said the ground was a part of the process of the catch. There's no mention in that ABC formula, right? If after A and B have been completed, C, perform an act common to the game. And nowhere does it say, and survive the ground. In 2010's NFL, that was a part of the process if you were falling. So since that was removed from being the process of the catch, it is in fact a catch.
Do you know when this part of the rule book was added?
2018, I believe, was when the change was made. And so it was not in play when another controversial catch occurred. That being Dez Bryant's playoff mishap here. We'll see Tony Romo late in the fourth, on 4th down, take a shot deep down the left side to number 88, who looks like he makes the catch, kind of comes loose there at the end, but the ref signals him down. Call on the field as a catch, right, Tyler?
Yes, refs do signal that he is down. He extends the ball. They say, no, he didn't get a touchdown, but he did catch it, and he's down at the 1. And then the booth goes back to review it. And this is going to be your key here.
Yep, this is the
the
angle.
ball popping out. This is it, yes. Catch, couple steps, reaches for the pylon, and the ball comes out as it hits the ground before the pylon.
And so since this was pre-2018, this ball was coming out. Surviving the ground was a necessary part of the process of the catch. That means that it doesn't matter that he secured possession. It doesn't matter that he made an act common to the game. It doesn't matter that he has all of his necessary body parts in bounds. He had to survive the ground per pre-2018 NFL rules, and he did not. Neither of these players survived the ground.
Now, in today's rule, would that be considered a catch? Because he made a move. He extended the ball. The ball extension is why he even has the potential for the ball to hit the ground anyway. So he's extending. So he's making a move common to the game. So he would be considered down at the 1 yard line, but a catch in today's rulebook, correct?
So I think it's closer than Calvin Johnson, because Calvin Johnson's, to me, seems fairly obvious. It's a clear extension of the ball away. He transferred it from 2 hands to 1 with clear possession. Calvin Johnson's, to me, is like a partially legally blind man could call that a catch under today's rule book. Dez's gets a little bit blurry because, and I'm going to highlight this very briefly, because of the fact that the ball kind of gets jarred loose here. Like it moves and then he has to reset it. You could argue that
when does he get possession then?
You could argue that he never lost possession there and he immediately regained it. But to me, this is more questionable than the Calvin Johnson rule. But because the call on the field was a reception, no way that this gets overturned in modern NFL. If you had to overturn it with that evidence, I could see them not. But because it's called on the field, I think there's no chance that they overturn this incomplete. I'm curious your thoughts, though, Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, the ball hitting the ground and then it jarring loose is such a problem that if you see that as a receiver, it really does become 50-50 as to really how the ref is feeling that day, or really how New York is feeling that day, because it goes to New York if it goes to the booth. But yeah, I think if you get in the argument of he had possession while falling, then yes, I would say it would be a catch in today's rule book, because I would say that the extension and reaching towards the pylon would be considered an act common to the game.
Agreed. And I think that it's hard because these are huge. Like, I mean, one of them directly overturned the result of a game, and the other one probably cost the Cowboys their first NFC Championship appearance this century. So, but I think that the NFL, by and large, has done a better job of officiating what a catch is, although this past season was some of the worst that we've seen. There was the Isaiah Likely incident, and there was the Brandon Cooks and McMillan interception tumble topsy-turvy thing in the Bills-Broncos playoff game that caused a lot of controversy. So there may need to be further edits to what a catch actually is, but at least they've cleared it up, in my opinion, from what it used to be.
They have gotten better from 2010 to 2015. Those were dark times in the NFL if you were a wide receiver as to knowing what a catch was.
Sure. But that is all we have for you today. Make sure you tune in next week because we start our draft coverage, our favorite time of the year. So if you're not subscribed already, do that and don't miss a single team because we will be covering all 32. And take care. Thanks for watching.
Appreciate you guys.